Hello, everyone. I'm joined remote by Steve from Team Liquid to talk a little bit about the things that Team Liquid is doing as we go through this very interesting time for all of us. I thought it was important to talk to somebody just about what was going on the organization side and how everybody's approaching it. This, of course, my coverage is brought to you by Alienware. This interview is brought to you by Alienware. Thank you so much for them sticking through with all of us as we're doing this stuff. So, Steve, first off, how are you doing personally?
Personally, I'm doing okay. I wish I was exercising more. I haven't done much of that. And I've been a little like corona anxiety, thinking about it more than I probably should. And I've been a little stressed out with just everything that we've been doing at Team Liquid in order to respond diligently and appropriately, but also as leaders in the space. And so that's been a lot of effort and conversations, and we've got a task force internal at Team Liquid that we've been working on. So that, and I have a little stressed out about what's going on politically on things, and just in the U.S. in general. So that's a little taxing personally, I guess, from a
Yeah.
mental perspective. But yeah, I'm happy to be healthy. There's a lot of other folks out there that can't say the same, and that's really unfortunate. And my heart goes out to not only those individuals, but everybody that's on the ground that's like working to prevent this in the healthcare industry. And there's been a slew of charity events and streams, and there's just a lot of folks that are going the extra mile and putting in that kind of care and consideration. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned what you guys are doing at Team Liquid. I'd love to get an idea because, obviously some people watching this might be familiar with the league side of Team Liquid, but obviously you guys have players all over the place and you have offices across two continents. I mean, what has it been like for you running the organization and trying to get everything into, this kind of new world that we find ourselves in right now?
Yeah. So Team Liquid, we are getting close to the 100 employee mark, and that's not inclusive of contractors. We're very much a worldwide organization, and so it's not just me, but definitely our leadership team in general, looking to respond appropriately in different regions of the world. We have a worker that's actually in Wuhan, which is the where COVID-19 started. And so we've been tracking this for quite some time, and keeping ourselves informed. And as there's varying degrees of information and whatever municipality or country and restrictions, like we've been navigating that, as you can imagine, from a doing what we can do or are able to do in different regions of the world. There's different laws that apply, and just even navigating through stuff like confidentiality and HIPAA, and like, with information about, folks that could be potentially test positive for COVID-19, and how you handle that, and then information and making everybody aware and giving them the right precautions to take. And it's just been learning a lot in a very short amount of time, but I think we've done a pretty awesome job. I'm actually really proud of the company and the staff that really rallied. We were able to notify stakeholders at Team Liquid, and do a very thoughtful communication plan to internal employees, and do a message to the public. And I think we were one of the first esports organizations to kind of speak out about it, and get a message out to our fans. And we've done a pretty good job in a very trying time.
Yeah. What what is going on the day to day? Because I mean, I think we saw you guys tweeted that the office was closed, and so now everyone in the company is working from home and remote, I assume.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. We have some individuals that don't have a good work home setup, that we're still in a transition period of figuring out ways to not have to choose between their work and their health, right? And, always opting for health, but in some situations where both can coexist, managing through that process, and it's not like a flip of a switch. I would say that we still have some folks that are going in and out of some of our facilities here and there to tie up loose ends and transition through a period. But for the most part, yes, like our organization is work from home. But good news is that we have a lot of staff that work from home already, and
Yeah.
we're a gaming organization, and like many others that will probably watch this and kind of understand, like we're used to headsets and virtual calls and webcams and working remotely, and so many of our staff are already. So we were more resilient than I think a lot of other companies out there.
Well, I wanted to ask you specifically just about where you see the organization moving towards, and how this affects the org going forward. These are obviously the secondary, third, or fourth, concerns for everybody right now, but they are still concerns as people figure out how to navigate all this. So, for instance, how do you approach content? Because, I was thinking about this. All the league teams, for the most part, create these like docu-series where they follow the players and they go to the arenas and they interview them back at home. Like, have you guys been talking about that on the content team? Obviously, you have, like, much like me, we have active sponsored deliverables, and how do you complete these during this time? I mean, are those the types of conversations you're having right now, navigating?
Yeah. I'd say like the first type of conversation that we're having is identifying what our role is in all of this. What is Team Liquid's role? What are we here to do? And let's make sure we stay within our role. I think that that's important. We're not overreaching and overstating or trying to do more than what other people are good at, right? And so from my perspective, the conclusion that we've come to internally is that, we're here to maybe help with providing at-home entertainment when folks are spending a lot more time at home in quarantine. And it's not a awesome, very proud role to be in, but that's kind of what we're capable of. And so, that means that we're hosts. We have awesome Discord events, and we can maybe create more types of content that folks can watch, and all still while, implementing a policy to provide the right kind of information and methodology from a training perspective for the leagues that are continuing to go. And then just streaming content, YouTube content, and more specifically to your question about like, what are we doing to be able to transition the stuff that was filmed in person to now going at home? I think it's doable, right? Like not everyone, sorry. Content creators are trying to figure this out, right? It's like this race to, okay, well, what can be captivating, entertaining, and also be done fully produced, filmed, and edited at home. And we're figuring that out too. So there's lots of conversations on how to do that. And what's really great is that the gaming community is so understanding of that, right? Like, it doesn't matter if it's overly produced or, super polished or professional. Like, what folks want is the emotion, the raw stuff, and so like you can still capture that sitting in your bedroom and chatting. So we will find out ways to do that, and are already implementing some of that stuff.
Well, many in the esports industry are taking a moment to point out that esports as an industry and as an entertainment product might be more resilient than, for instance, traditional sports, which by and large have canceled, at least across the U.S. and even globally, or at least postponed in situations where they haven't outright canceled. Do you feel as though esports has this ability to kind of survive all of this?
I think that the esports industry has a resiliency that does not exist in other professional sports. And that is that we obviously can play and compete from home. However, when you've built 8 or 9 years of, let's say in this case, League of Legends, infrastructure from a production and broadcasting perspective, and you need to flip that on a dime and be able to implement kind of like the season one of your favorite episodic thing that you watch, whether you go back and watch season one of Friends or American Idol or something, you're like, whoa, like that's how it used to be. Like I forgot that the production value was so low, and but it was still endearing, and so that's I think a little bit of what's going to happen in like a week transition period. How do you deal with some of these new challenges? Like there's going to be disconnects, there's going to be lags, there's going to be pauses. Remember the day of pauses in League of Legends? Like way
Yeah.
more than today, like in the middle of the game. I would expect stuff like that, you know? And so I don't think it's going to be a, on off switch. We just pick, don't miss a beat. We'll miss some, but I do think, generally speaking, the esports industry is incredibly more resilient than other entertainment professional sports industries. And what's pretty cool is that you're seeing so many of these collaborations of artists and athletes in basketball and baseball and football and stuff doing more in gaming. Like I just saw Lady Gaga tweet that she was playing video games all day for the last 4 days.
Yeah.
It's like this is cool. Like there's increase. And another quick story. I was on a call this morning with one of my staff members, and they had some kids in the background that were kind of like screaming and stuff and kind of going crazy. And I, after the call, I was like, hey, so what's up? Having your kids at home is probably pretty stressful. And he was like, well, it's so endearing because now they're doing the classrooms from online. They're doing these Zoom calls where like, 8-year-olds get it together and they're like, hey, good morning. How's it going? And my mind, I'm thinking, wow, this is like everyone's being forced to just communicate and like do the day to day digitally, something that we just take for granted is they're being introduced to. So I think I know I got a little off topic, but I just think that there are some innovations and some culture changes happening, some paradigm shifts to digital content expression and being able to consume that.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that we saw happen in the NBA was one player tested positive, and then you saw the entire league shut down, and then very shortly thereafter, the other league shut down. I'm kind of curious. We have not, at least as of yet, heard any reports of any, to my knowledge, esports players testing positive in the U.S. But let's say that happened in league. Do you think that the league would continue on, or what do you think would need to happen in that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to speak too much on behalf of what the league may do, but I think that they would be diligent in figuring out the details associated with it, right? But if that was the case, then I think there would be a real consideration to how that would affect the health of everyone else that is associated with the league, not just players, but staff and production and Riot. And I think if from a content and an entertainment perspective, if you're ever putting somebody at risk of having to, think about their health in exchange for working, that's not right, So, but there's a lot of like context to a possible situation like that needs to be evaluated, and but it should definitely be consideration. It just depends on what it is.
Yeah. The other question I was going to ask along those lines is, I just kind of thought about this a short time ago as I was reading about the Canadian and U.S. borders getting shut down. But, LCS more than any other League of Legends league is made up of so many of these international players. Do you think there's, are you as a team owner, do you think some of the other teams, I don't know, are considering, okay, what happens if we end up in a situation where a player wants to go home, right? Like on this moment of crisis, or as things are developing, progressing in the US, what happens if, a player's like, hey, I can't do this anymore. I need to be back home with family or wherever.
Yeah. I mean, I think each org has a responsibility, or not a responsibility. Each org has their own control in that kind of decision to some degree. I can speak on behalf of Team Liquid and what we would do if we were presented that concern from one of our players. We would absolutely, without a doubt, allow them to go back home, if because I believe mental health is right up there with physical health, and it's very important. Now, practically speaking, you have to look at different regions in the world, right, where there are more cases and less cases, and where there, and what's happening with either being able to travel or travel restrictions and going in and out of certain countries. And so, there would be a process to making the right decision on something like that. But ultimately, mental health is important. And if there is stress, like, you want to be close to the people that you care about and your family and friends. And, and where is the safest place? You got to ask yourself that too. And what about exposure during traveling? And, like, there's just a lot to think through in that kind of scenario,
Right.
But diagnose the variables and come to a decision together.
Yeah. Well, I'm fascinated just to see how quickly the whole industry has been able to move to online leagues. I mean, in a sense, maybe not too surprising, because obviously the games themselves, this is the primary way in which they're played. But it's been fascinating to see that. Were you involved at all, or what were those conversations like with the league as you guys were looking at finishing the rest of Spring Split?
What was great and was that Greeley, who's the commissioner over at Riot, Chris Greeley, he was in close communication with all the teams and asking and soliciting feedback. I don't know what was happening behind the scenes with all of that diligence and collecting information and coming to a decision. And of course, there's a lot of logistics associated with it to help curb the issue of disconnects and cheating and whatever could end up happening, right? Because you don't have control of the set. But we were able to express what we thought, and that's as far as I know the involvement. Yeah, I just don't know what happened behind the scenes, but I felt very listened to by the
Yeah.
lead.
Well, I I know it's only kind of week one in the U.S. of all this stuff, right? It definitely feels like everything ramped up in this past week, and so a lot of people have been figuring it out. But what do you see the next couple of weeks looking like, at least for TL and esports and maybe the LCS?
Yeah. I think for the general esports industry, I think that there's been a lot of postponements to push events back on the calendar, or cancellations. I think that you're going to see the esports industry very, well, not say very quickly, more quickly adapt the ability of producing content at home in comparison to other entertainment industries. And so I think in that, it's good. And I think that digital consumption of content is way up. We've been seeing some leading indicators, and you probably notice this too. Like, you log on to Discord and it's lagging, and go into League of Legends and, like, you're attempting to connect, and traffic is up. Right, that we know that more folks are playing video games. In terms of TL, I think that we are going to innovate in terms of how we can produce content to our communities, what I mentioned earlier about our role in this whole thing. And we'll get better at that, and continue to maintain competitiveness as much as we can with the team. And then that gets to the league team, which is they're continuing to practice and play and scrim and play from home and have everything done on Discord, which is kind of awesome. And I think we'll be ready. Something to share about just my personal view is that in a lot of the games, maybe the last 4 or 5 that we played in the season so far, there's been this kind of trepidation, like a bit of not leaning in, but leaning back in terms of play. And I think part of that is because of pressure, expectations, all the issues that we had with the season so far with visas and what have you, and making changes on the roster. And so what a silver lining maybe is that by playing from home, there's a little bit more comfort, right? That hopefully shows in their play. And, I don't know if that's to be a case, kind of a small thing in the larger scope of things, but, I think our guys are ready and hungry and they're scrimming really well.
Yeah. I mean, you say that, but there is a Reddit thread right now where they all ended up in the same game in solo duo queue, apparently lost to a bunch of other people who just randomly got signed up against them.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to look at that and have a little bit of concern, right?
I mean, it's this solo queue game, like they're not band picking, and Jensen's not even in the Discord with them, and it's just a solo queue game.
Yeah.
You can't read too
Fair
much
enough,
into it.
Anything you want to say to any of the TL or League fans out there?
Yeah, I just want to say that appreciate that we're able to do the league this weekend and bear with all the issues that may happen. And I really hope that you're staying safe. Do your part to flatten the curve by making sure that you self-quarantine if possible, and stay safe. And this is a good time to reach out to the people that you care about and that care about you, and express that. So, I love you guys, all the TL fans out there.
Thank you so much, Steve, for taking the time to do this amongst what I know is probably a very busy week for you as you're getting everything sorted, but I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Travis.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Hey.
Hey, thanks so much for watching that interview. It's part of my remote coverage here from the Gafford Industries bunker as we get through this interesting time. I want to thank Alienware and Movement so much for supporting my content, especially even as we have to kind of do this weird version of it. And I appreciate you guys so much. If you'd like to check out their stuff, there's a link to both of their websites in the description below. It actually helps me out a lot. There's a promo code for Alienware. There's a promo code for Movement. If you use that link, you can save some money for either of them. And doing that stuff really helps me out as we all kind of figure out what sponsorship is going to look like for creators in this new time. Anyway, thanks for watching the interview.